everyone, and welcome to our new podcast, Look Up.
Dummie F.
This is Dominique.
And I'm Jen Sidary.
And we are here in Barcelona. Jen, what is the podcast about? Why do we do this?
We are Americans. We actually I personally moved to Spain 2 years ago when the United States decided to overturn Roe v. Wade. And I just was like, here's what. Basta, America, you are on the wrong track. So I moved to Spain, not in a million years thinking that the country could go even further than overturning Roe v. Wade and electing a criminal. And since then, Dominique and I were talking, and we just decided that we needed to get out there and start doing something and talking to people about real issues that, clearly no one seems to be watching real news. So maybe you'll watch us instead.
Well, yeah. And for me, I'm French, but I moved to the US in 2004. And then I decided to become American. I believed in the American dream, and I work in tech, and I wanted to be part of this. And then I became an American citizen, and I got the chance to vote. And for the first time, I voted at an American election, and I was, okay, Hillary's going to win. And guess what? Donald Trump won. I cried that
was the first time you voted, dude?
That was my first time voting in the US, and Donald Trump won. And I remember I was alone in my kitchen. My husband was traveling. My son was with his grandparents. Even my dog was not home. I was alone and calling my parents at 6 a.m. and said, I have to come back to France. It's not going to work.
Oh my God.
Then I didn't. Then I was like, okay, 4 years going to pass. Joe Biden came. I was like, yes, we're back in. It's okay. American is in. But then it happened again. It just happened again. And I'm like, what have I done over the past 8 years to make this not happen again? And I just realized that I've done nothing, and that it's time to stop. That's why Look Up.
Dummie F.
Right? And this is what this podcast is going to be about. Like, this is what we want to share with you guys, is now it's time to do something, to share our stories, to share what's going on. Both Jen and I, we did spend a lot of time in Ukraine. We saw, before the war, we saw firsthand the Russian propaganda every day that is shaping our politics and our world. And we just want to share that with you guys and to stop this, right?
Yeah, I do think for sure our time in Ukraine led us to this moment. We'll get into a bit about our histories here in a little bit, and you'll understand why it's so odd for me to be so obsessed now with geopolitics and what's happening in the world. But I definitely think it was Ukraine that brought us to this moment, right?
Yeah.
And
well, let's talk about this. Let's talk about you, Jen, because yes, you're American, but you also have an Italian passport, and you really fought for it, actually, to get this Italian passport. But I want to know, let's share with our audience a little bit more about you. So you're a Kansas City girl.
I know, it seems kind of crazy. No one would probably guess that I'm from the Midwest. So born and raised in Kansas City, which I'm sure most of you foreigners have no idea where that is.
I had no idea where it was before meeting you. So
yeah.
Yes.
I think it's getting more on the map now because we have the most famous quarterback in the world, Patrick Mahomes, from the Kansas City Chiefs. So now I do think people at least know where it is. And of course,
I have no clue who that is, but that's okay.
Okay, but you do. But here's what you do know. You do know that a guy that plays on the team, actually dates Taylor Swift.
Oh, that dude. Okay, yeah. I know that dude. Okay.
I would pretty much. So
yeah,
so Kansas City, born and raised. I ended up leaving Kansas City to go to fashion school in Los Angeles. And I have to say, like, kind of never looked back, actually. Went to fashion school. Maybe, guess what? I didn't finish because I partied like a rock star. For those of you that don't know, it was the early 90s. And I spent more time in underground parties than I spent in college. So I did not finish college. Thankfully, still went on to have a pretty successful career, I think. Went back to Kansas City, spent 12 years at like the premier department store there, similar to Bergdorf Goodman, called Halls. And then finally got a job outside of KC. And I moved to Las Vegas to join Zappos, which is where Dominique and I met, actually.
Absolutely. Yes.
We'll probably talk about that.
We will talk about Zappos and Tony Hsieh, the founder of Zappos, because he was so important in both our lives. So we will, I'm sure we will have guests actually in the podcast. We want to have guests. So this first one is just to introduce ourselves, but we will definitely talk about Zappos and Tony and how important he was in both our lives. But so Zappos experience, now you're in Las Vegas, you're in the Zappos experience, like you move also into a little bit more of a still fashion, but also tech world. In a crazy moment, like, I mean, Tony also had a political agenda. He wanted to rebuild this downtown Las Vegas. Is it when you started to become more interested into politics? So how did it happen that you became interested in politics to the point where now you're kind of like almost a news junkie? Like,
it's insane. Yeah, I know. I need to watch less news for sure. I don't think Zappos taught me that. I think Zappos taught me a few things. I mean, it was such a crazy revolutionary company. And not just Tony, but Fred as well.
Fred Musler.
Yeah, they were all kind of this, like, had this go big or go home mentality, which is something maybe I didn't like roll the dice as much as I should. So they definitely taught me this entrepreneurship, you know, balls to the wall, do anything you can to grow the business, which is great. And I loved it. And it's certainly brought me to this moment.
Right.
I mean, took the business from $15 million to $100 million because if you didn't go big at that place, you should just go home. And of course, he taught me to take a leap of faith, as Tony always said.
Yes.
Which later on in my life, I took this crazy leap of faith, going to Ukraine. And then, after 7 years, amazing. But I think part of it was holacracy that he started. And I ended up getting, in my opinion, wrongly fired from this company. So I do think I was a part of canceled culture before canceled culture had a name.
Right. We'll come back to holacracy and all those things. I mean, for our viewers who are not familiar with the concept, it's kind of the idea that there's other way to organize a company. A company can be more self-organized and management can be done in a very different way.
And I call it when the patients run the asylum.
Right. So a little bit of a fuck show as well, but okay.
So one day I'm at Zappos, and Tony, who's like super shy, comes up to my desk and he's like, "Oh my God, there's like this guy, I was meeting with him and he like does work for like Gucci and these brands that you want. So like maybe you should meet him." So I walk into this conference room, probably it was like 2009, do you think?
Yes, probably 2009.
Okay. And I walk in and here sits Dominique, and I was like, "Hey, dude! Like, I heard you work with
Mm-hmm.
Francois
Oh,
Henry Pinot.
right.
Blah blah blah. What are you doing? So, what were you even doing
Well,
that
I
day?"
was having my own company, and just the name of my company will tell you a lot about me. It was called Rebellion Lab, and I was the chief rebel. I was not the CEO of the company, and that has always been the type of way I want to, well, lead my life and do my business. So I was helping big fashion brands like, yeah, Gucci, Saint Laurent, Chanel, and all those brands and beauty brands to become more digital savvy and to build their digital strategy. And I felt like to do that, you need to shake the management, like to shake them real hard. And to shake them real hard, you had to introduce them to people like Jen, who were shaking the industry real hard. Actually, I mean, for you guys who don't know, but Zappos Couture and Zappos in general was really a big deal in changing the way people buy those brands and interact with those brands. And Jen was kind of leading that thing. So for the Gucci of the world, it was a really big deal, Zappos at that time. Even the way Zappos was dealing client services, and it was like you take everything you know, you do everything differently, like 200%. And
Well,
that's
yeah,
kind of the
definitely.
thing I love.
I mean,
right?
they invented free shipping, which is something that we like
Right.
take for granted now.
Mhm.
But were you always in fashion? Because
No.
I mean, I don't even personally, even though we're best friends, I don't even know that much about your history
Okay.
in
So
France, but I feel like you know a bit more about politics and
yeah.
shit than me.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
So I grew up with politics, basically. So I grew up in Paris. Well, I'm born in a small island called La Réunion, and actually it's interesting because it's becoming more and more important in my life to be from Africa, and not just from France. But I grew up in Paris, and both my parents work for the government. My mom is a university professor. My dad is an engineer. He was a diplomat for part of his life. But I grew up in a very liberal family. Like in France, we call them socialist, even though in the US it's not exactly the way. But both my parents were very involved. My mom worked for several ministers, a French prime minister. I grew up with politicians around my life.
And she wrote the Constitution. What did she write?
She wrote the Constitution of Mauritius when she was 23, and when she was 24, she was one of the advisor of the French prime minister on social politics. And then she works for one of the largest union in France as number 3 or number 4 of that union. They were always member of parliament, having dinner at home, going on vacation with us, and I grew up with this. And then I went to what's called Sciences Po. So Sciences Po is the Institute of Science of Political Science of France. And basically, it's kind of a mini Harvard for politicians, I would say. So 100% of the French politicians, president, went to my school. And it was only 700 people at the time. And so our current French president went to Sciences Po, the previous one went to Sciences Po, the previous one went to Sciences Po, the only one who didn't went to Sciences Po is Charles de Gaulle, because Sciences Po did not exist at that time.
So we couldn't be more opposite.
So
okay,
yeah,
just saying,
right, exactly.
Just saying.
Yes.
Even though we're best friends, you went to the Harvard of France, and
For politics.
I raved and went to underground parties.
Right. And then I'm an historian. I did an MBA, and I mean my master in history and another master in economy. So I've always been very passionate about it, and I always thought about myself one day I would become a politician. I mean that is, and I still have sometimes like, and that's actually my conversation with Jen is, oh, I did nothing for this election again, and I really feel extremely bad about it. And I felt like, okay, what should I have done? Should I have had become a politician? Not a politician? I don't know.
But I just feel like, you know, people are on YouTube and Spotify and SoundCloud and Instagram and TikTok, and like this is where people are getting their news now,
Right.
you know?
Right.
And you know, we would like to be out there giving people real news instead of fake news. We're completely, and we'll talk a lot about this on the podcast, we're completely against Russian propaganda. Russian propaganda doesn't just come from Russia. Actually,
Right.
a lot of the countries around the world are using what I call Russian propaganda playbook.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
So you know, I think Trump
is using it as well.
The MAGA is all about it, man. Like, here's the thing. Russian propaganda is, in a nutshell, tell somebody a lie every single day and they begin to believe it.
Right, exactly.
And that is how they won the election. And I feel like it's so frustrating.
It is.
That we're listening to this bullshit. Like, the best one is your child goes to school in the morning as a boy and comes home as a girl. Like, do we really believe this is happening?
No, of course not.
Like how about this one? This one was a good one.
Okay.
Women are killing babies and having abortions in the 9th month. And then even after the baby is born, we decide whether we're going to kill the baby or not. I'm like, are you seriously believing this shit is happening in America?
Right. So this is really why we want to do this podcast, but something also important triggered this, and it's Ukraine. And I think to put things in perspective on why we're doing this podcast, we need to talk about Ukraine, because in both our cases, Ukraine changed completely our life. So I'm going to start by telling my story about Ukraine, because you came in right a little bit after, and maybe a little bit because of me.
A lot because of you.
A lot because
Trust
of me.
I didn't even know, guys, seriously, I didn't even know where Ukraine was on a map before I went there.
Me neither.
And in America before the war, really everyone thought Ukraine and Russia were the same,
right?
Had the same values, which we have all learned is not the case. But yeah, so I mean, definitely I would have never gone there if it wasn't for you.
So I moved to Ukraine. I moved to Kyiv in 2019 to become the CEO of what is probably the largest innovation center in Europe. It's called Unit City. I got invited to this position by crazy cool Ukrainian friends who had that vision for their country, that if we want to stop the brain drain, we have to create a place where Ukrainian who are passionate about tech, and honestly, guys, they are the best in the world in tech, we're passionate about tech, instead of having to move to the US or somewhere else in Europe, could find a place where they can create their company, learn, work for cool tech startup, and just feel like, you know what, it's as cool here than it is in Silicon Valley, or maybe it's even cooler here than it is in Silicon Valley. And so I had the chance to be invited to become the CEO of this, to help develop the vision, to manage it, and to feel that vibrant energy that I felt in Silicon Valley when I moved there in 2004. And we will come back in this podcast, that is not there anymore. Like, that Silicon Valley is dead. That Silicon Valley is led by the people like Elon Musk and people like that, who are completely feeding into the Trump bullshit. But that was not the case in 2004. And the Ukraine I discovered was a land of freedom, a land of let's create stuff, let's build companies, let's create amazing things. And I felt this amazing energy. And then COVID happened, and Jen was in Los Angeles alone in her apartment. Okay, how did you come to Ukraine?
I mean, well, kind of going back to this, like, you know, canceled culture thing, you know, I feel like I never got over getting wrongly fired in 2014.
Right.
I mean, I'm not like one to do psychotherapy and all this kind of stuff, although in hindsight, I probably should have maybe done something.
That's okay.
Instead of just try to get over it myself. So fast track COVID times. I'm still pretty depressed and uninspired. And I remember like even sitting at lunch with you and Jeff and Lucas at Sunset Plaza, and you guys were looking at me like, you are dead inside, girl. So thankfully, I had just gotten let go from a trade show company that I was not enjoying working for. And not kidding, you guys called me and you're like, oh my God, babes, like bars and restaurants are open in Kyiv. You should come here and like hang out with us. So I literally bought a one-way ticket to Kyiv.
There you go. And
one day before my birthday, I landed in Ukraine and I felt so at home. You know, it was weird. It's like I felt the way that I felt when I landed in Italy for the first time. So, you know, come to find out, I do have Ukrainian blood. So 42% of me is Jewish, and my ancestors, because I just did the my heritage DNA test thing, are from Ukraine, Poland, Belarusia. So a big portion of me is from there. So now it like makes sense. But yeah, I had no idea this city would be so damn cool.
Right. Yes. So I think moving fast forward, Jen moved with us for a while, then starting going back and forth, and then something terrible happened. February 2022, full-scale invasion of Russia. I personally didn't want to see it coming.
Again, Dominique, like literally, I think the week that the war broke out, I could have been saying to you, look up Dummie Fuck.
Right.
Okay. I could have been saying this to you.
Maybe you did. Actually, probably you did.
Because so Jeff and I had already left. I was in New York showing Ukrainian fashion brands at New York Fashion Week. And you literally left with Vasily Ivanovich, I think, to go to Dubai or something with a tiny suitcase. And me and Jeff were on the phone. We're like, dude, oh my God, like pack everything, like take everything. The war is going to break out. And you're like, oh no, it's fine, dude.
I was like, chill, dude. It's all good. There's only 150,000 troops, Russian troops all around Ukraine. It's good.
Well, because I feel like sentiment in the country too was, you know, I mean, obviously Zelensky didn't want to create panic.
Right.
Like I understand, but I can promise you, and Dominique was on these emails. We were getting emails from the U.S. Embassy that, you know, first it said, okay, there's probably going to be a war in Ukraine. And then it was like, there's going to be a war in Ukraine, like in all caps. And then when they send you an email and say, hey.
Oh, they called me.
No, it's the U.S. Embassy. We won't come in and save you if something happens. I think it's a red flag, babes.
Okay, look up Dummie Fuck.
Look up Dummie Fuck. But you know, I was even when I was in New York setting up these Ukrainian fashion brands, FaceTiming them, and I was like, okay, babes, like, so if Putin invades your country this week, what do you want me to do with all your samples? And they're like, oh my God, you're such a paranoid American.
I know, right? So yeah, I left for Dubai on a business trip. I left all my stuff in our lovely apartment, not taking anything, and not believing that this would happen. So basically, this event changed our life and changed our perspective on basically not just Russia, but the world, and how the world is divided between two types of leaders. But the leaders who are apparently winning right now are not the democratic one, but are more the strong, more authoritarian leaders. And I think both Jen and I don't want those. I don't feel like people who believe in freedom are the one winning right now.
But I think it's crazy. Okay, so since I have a zero political background, what I think is nuts is countries like America are going more toward this authoritarianism.
Right. Mm-hmm.
But then look at the wins that we're having though around the world. Like look at what happened with Syria, which is
Right.
to me is so exciting to watch these people finally get their freedom back, and look at, people fighting and walking down the street in Georgia and marching,
Right.
Trying to become a part of Europe, and, Romania throwing out their election results because they know that Russia interfered with their election. So it is odd that like some of these countries are moving in the direction we think is
yes.
right.
Or
and
we
then,
hope.
And then, countries that you wouldn't think you'd have to explain the importance of freedom to. I mean, maybe they're just like taking it for granted now, and they don't even in America understand the price for freedom and what it takes to keep this.
And I think that's really explained the title of our podcast. It's like, it's time to look up. Because if we don't and we take it for granted, then we're going to lose it, and you're going to be like me in my position, being, I'm going to Dubai and nothing will happen, and then guess what? Following day, Russia is invaded, the country I love. Or I'm going to be in Malibu enjoying my time. It's election week and it's election night, and guess who won? Not only the popular vote, but also the electoral vote. It's Donald Trump, and I'm left only with my tears. And I've done what? Nothing, because I've been a dummy fuck and I haven't looked up. So I think that's really the story where we're coming from and the story we want to tell. So how is this podcast going to work, Jen? I mean, let's dig in.
I mean, first of all, like, we do have to tell everyone, we do not think that the left is always right.
Oh no, we don't. We don't.
Do not do not think that we're just gonna say Joe Biden was totally amazing.
No, we will not.
We're not gonna say that Kamala Harris didn't make mistakes and hasn't said contradictory things. So we do want to position ourselves more listening to both sides of the fence.
Right.
I mean, for me, I'm psycho about news. My number one news outlet is CNN. I do love Anderson Cooper and Jake Tapper and,
well, he's cute,
and
sorry,
Caitlin Collins and all of them. But I do make myself watch Fox News during the week, and I do actually even subscribe to Newsmax, so that I can really hear both sides of the coin.
Okay.
So I, please, don't think if you are a Republican, you can't come and listen to our podcast.
Of course.
And we're even going to have some right-wing guests.
Yes.
I think on our show.
Yes, of course.
Coming soon.
Yes.
I just love to watch all different types of news. So I think what we want to do is inform people who are as crazy with political background as yourself, and then people who have like no desire to watch, CNN or MSNBC, because I'll, dumb it down to the fashion girl, so she can even understand what's happening in the world. Because, this America First agenda, I just think, is so wrong. And I know you know this about me more than anything. I mean, my business is called Angel for Fashion, and I believe that there needs to be more angels in the world. I believe that people need to think of somebody else other than themselves first. So that's why I think that America First agenda is so wrong. And I think if there were more angels in the world and people were thinking of doing things for others, it would really make a different world.
That is so interesting that you're mentioning that. So your business is called Angel for Fashion. My business is, so I'm raising a fund to invest in tech startup from Ukraine, and it's called Phoenix. Because I do believe that from the ashes, a phoenix will raise. And actually, I do believe that it's probably going to come from Eastern Europe. We're going to be very surprised by the values that are going to be carried by Ukrainians who've been fighting for their freedom, for their life, for their country. I think this is an unprecedented war that we're watching. I mean, there's more than, I don't know, 800,000 people who died on each side. So it's like, it's the largest war that happened in the world since World War II. So something will raise from that. That is hopefully going to also bring us hope and bring back values that we believe a lot of people have just stopped fighting for. And this is why we have someone like Donald Trump. People are willing to give up their freedom to what, actually? I don't even understand, to what or to why. To be protected, to have some, I just
think it's become a very selfish world in a lot of cases. I mean, it's shocking to me that like we're going to let Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, go in and decide where our tax dollars should be spent. I mean, how can he be impartial?
Right.
And he gets a lot of government money for his businesses and his programs and whatnot. So like, how is that dude going to be in there, like really making decisions on behalf of 330 million people in the United States and be impartial and say, okay, I'm going to keep this program for, children with cancer. I'm going to keep this program for even just basic like food stamps.
Right.
He doesn't even, he can't even grasp what it would even be like to have to be so humble as to walk into a grocery store with food stamps. Like, the guy, like, do you think he ever thought about where his next meal is coming from? Hashtag no, dude.
Right.
Hashtag
exactly.
no. And, I mean, do I think that the US government should be spending money more wisely? 1,000,000%.
Of course.
But like, he is not the dude to make these decisions. It needs to be somebody that's, been at the top and at the bottom.
Right. And plus, we don't even know how this is going to be controlled by the Congress. So who does he report to? I mean, does he report to only Donald Trump, or really to us, the people who have, a Congress? Even though we don't agree with this Congress, but at least it has been elected. You know what I mean? So anyway, this is what this podcast is going to be about.
It's going to be good.
It's going to be good. We want you guys to look up, because we don't want any more dummy fucks for the next elections.
Oh, look, he even said it.
Yes, right? And so, well, we will try to do this on a regular basis, right?
Well, so now both of us are living in Barcelona.
Right.
We both have, I think, left America for good. I don't know about you, but I don't see myself ever moving back there. I always make jokes and say I'm probably going to die in Spain, which is probably true. And so now we'll be here. We're going to be able to bring on guests.
Right.
Hopefully it'll be weekly-esque. You're going to be able to find us on, of course, Instagram and Spotify and SoundCloud and
YouTube.
Okay, I love
Of
it.
course,
I love
YouTube. So subscribe, follow us, love us, share, like,
And
all
tell
of it.
us what you think, because
Yes.
we are certainly not the experts, good and
Right.
bad. You can tell us what you're thinking. If you have ideas or ideas for guests, we're really open to anything, because we do not believe, like many politicians, that we know everything.
No, we don't.
Okay?
So look up.
Dummy fuck.